Gemma studied at the Royal Veterinary College in London and graduated in 2006. 6 months later, she immigrated to Australia with her husband, Jason. They settled on the Atherton Tablelands in far north Queensland, where she worked for 4 years at Tablelands Veterinary Service. It was here that she developed an interest in dairy cattle. In 2010, she moved to Victoria to take a residency position with the University of Melbourne, based at the vet group in Timboo. As part of the residency, Gemma undertook a master's degree. This original project looked at how practical change can affect calf health on dairy farms. However, the project grew and Gemma converted the master's degree in a PhD in February 2013. The project is now investigating how calf factors can affect subsequent reproductive and lactation performance. Completion of the project will be in August 2015. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gemma Chuck, who will present the topic Benchmarking and Improving Failure of Pathogen Transfer, Morbidity and Mortality Rates in Australian Pre-weaned Dairy Calves.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much for having me, and I need to thank in advance Dairy Australia for funding this project, the Gardner Foundation and the University of Melbourne and all my supervisors. So today I'm going to talk about preliminary benchmarking and setting targets for failure of pathogen transfer, morbidity and mortality. So currently there are no known targets for pre-weaning morbidity, mortality or FPT in Australia. There's a common acceptance of high levels of morbidity, less so of mortality. A lot of our clients in particular, I'm sure we're not alone in this, are very used to having a lot of sick calves and they just go, oh well, that's the way it is, and they generally call us when they start dying. We don't know the heifer survival rate, we don't know how many don't make it, and we don't know why they leave the mob and don't make it to the milking herd. So objective one of the project was basically to set these benchmarks. What should I be aiming for? If I was a farmer, in terms of calf rearing, what should he be aiming for? What is acceptable? You know, what's kind of okay? And when should I seek help? Some of us in the room will be familiar with fertility focus reports and mastitis focus reports, and we have these benchmarks in those areas, but we don't have them in calves currently. Objective 2 of this project, this is a very small part of my PhD, but the objective 2, for the purpose of this talk, was can we instigate practical change on dairy farms to improve calf health? So as Peter just told us, there's a lot of research into how farmers should do things. There's not so much into how they can do things, and that's kind of what I do. Good practice is not always practical, and dairy farmers face many challenges. They multitask all the time, and we need to make it easy and efficient if we're going to succeed, so that it doesn't all end up in the too hard basket. So, in year 1, which was in 2011, I collected the baseline data. So I looked at the current colostrum management practices on 8 southwest dairy farms. I measured, amongst a lot of other things, the prevalence of FPT using serum protein, so we didn't do a regular immunodiffusion assay, I just measured serum protein. Bled calves, 7 days, 24 hours to 7 days of age, so within that range. We looked at morbidity, and basically the definition of morbidity in this project was any calf treated with antimicrobials and or electrolytes. Morbidity, because I wasn't there on all farms, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, can be a bit of a grey area, so it needs to be really, really clearly defined. Mortality is generally easier to define, so yeah, that was easier. And that was all measured from birth until weaning. So at the end of year 1, we looked at the barriers to change, and I made recommendations based on the problems encountered. All the farms were different, and they all had different problems. I looked at the areas for improvement, and I basically split them up into pre-calving management, colostrum management, environment, health management, and nutrition. And it's beyond the scope of this talk to go into what I actually did, but maybe later. I based the recommendations on the likelihood of an improved outcome. Farmer compliance, there's no point recommending things if they're not going to do it. They'll end up in a too hard basket. And feasibility, how likely are they to do it? Are they going to be able to do it with all the things that they've got to do? In year 2, I did repeat measurements. So all the things, I'll show you the raw data in a second. And this was released for Objective 2. Have the practical changes had a beneficial effect? So was there a decrease in FBT? Was there a decrease in pre-weaning morbidity and a decrease in pre-weaning mortality? Farm selection. 8 farms were selected based on farmer compliance. That was number 1. I would say facilities, no, not at all. There was lots of OH&S problems. Herd size and calving pattern. So I was doing this as part of a University of Melbourne residency program, so I was doing it part-time, which meant I had to spread the herds out throughout the year because I had other responsibilities. So in year 1, I ended up with 650 calves, and in year 2, I ended up with 579 calves. The herd size, I wanted to basically see if there was a difference between small, medium and large operations. So there were less than 300 milking cows, 3 to 500 and greater than 500. We also looked at breed differences, so one farm was 100% Jersey, one farm was 100% Friesians, and the others were just a mixture of everything, including some Aussie Reds in there as well. This is a big slide. I measured a lot of things, and for the purpose of this, just the stuff in red. So calf ID, date of birth, serum protein, 24 hours to 7 days. Treatment, including date and duration and reason, and obviously the date of death. So what were the results? In year 1, a total of 22% of calves, so of N equals 650, had FPT, and I used a cut point of 5.0 based on the survey that Zoe and myself did. And we felt that if we used 5.2 or 5.5, they'd all have FPT. So I used 5.0, that can change. Across the herd, the range was 9.3 to 50% of calves having FPT. Median was 27.4, and the top 25% were achieving just 12%. In year 2, there were actually more calves with FPT. The range was even more, 6.7 to 78%. That was based, you'll see in a second, one herd just didn't care. The median came down, and the upper quartile were achieving 16.5%, so it went up a bit. So this graph just shows the red bars are calves up the side on the vertical axis, and on the x-axis we've got farms, 1 to 8 on the bottom. The red lines show the percentage of calves on each farm with FPT in 2011, and the grey bars show the same in 2012. So, 2 herds had less than 20%. Remember, this is an indirect method based on group basis. So they had less than 20% in both years, which was great. 4 of the 6 herds reduced FPT between years. Again, really good results. Farm 3 didn't care. They just left the calf on the cow for 3 days. The mean percentage reduction in FPT was about 42.4%, so the range was 17.5 to 71.1, so I was pretty happy with that. In general, they really did improve. And based on that, based on what the upper quartiles were achieving, I set the benchmark at 20% for an indirect method, not for a real. Okay, morbidity. Across the herds, again, range, medium, upper quartile. That's huge morbidity. Remember, this was animals that were treated. They weren't necessarily sick. One of the farms got a little bit needle happy with the trispan, and they just, anything that looked at them sideways, they just needled. So 92.6% of calves ended up being treated. The upper quartile achieving about just over 17%. In year 2, again, a really high range, at the top end of the range there. That was a herd that had a coccidiosis outbreak post-importing, which was a bit of a shame. But the median came down to 13%, which was fantastic, and the top 25% of farms were achieving under 10%. So again, similar graph to before. One herd had less than 10% morbidity for both years, and they raised like 180 calves in that batch, so really fantastic. 6 out of 7 herds reduced morbidity rates between the years, so again, really good. Farm 7 was the outbreak of cocci, so they all got treated with Vacox. The mean percentage reduction in morbidity was 46.4, the range was 12.8 to 86, so again, really good results. In general, they got better. based on that and based on what the top 25% of farmers were achieving, I set my percent morbidity target to be 10% less. Mortality, isn't it sad, that picture? Year 1, across the herds, ranged 0 to 16.3. Ironically, the farm that didn't lose any calves was the one with the highest prevalence of FPT. It's a thorn in my side, I tell you. Year 2, again, range was much smaller, 0 to 6.5%. The same farm, which has 80% of the calves with FPT, still didn't lose one. Just wanted to push one over. The median was 3.2%, and the top 25% were achieving 1.1% mortality, so really, really fantastic. Okay, similar graph, you should be used to these by now. That's farm 3, look at it. Oh, 2 herds, less than 3% mortality for both years, that's what we want. Mortality in the first year was actually greater than 10% on 3 farms, so that's a problem in my mind. But on these farms, the mean percentage reduction was 72.8. One farm, so farm 5, went from about 11% to 0, which was fantastic. Just by cleaning, they had really good colostrum quality, but they were just dirty, so we addressed their environment. And based on this, I set my benchmark at 3%. I'd like to set it at 0, but you know, calves die. So. Suggested benchmarks. So in a season, these benchmarks are preliminary. They do need validation. I'd like to get that going across Australia. I've written a little tool that I think you could sort of put out electronically, enter a postcode, and then we'd get feedback across Australia, but we'll see how that goes. So within a season, FBT using the indirect method of serum protein, less than 20%. Peter Constable would like to probably to get that down to less than 10, especially using cut point of 5.0, but I guess we won't run before we can walk it. Morbidity, meaning calves treated, less than 10%. So if your clients aren't losing many calves, but 80% of them are being treated with antibiotics, then that needs to be addressed. Mortality, less than 3%. This is achievable. This is field data on real farms in Australia, and it's very, very achievable. There was a mean percentage reduction in failure capacity transfer, morbidity and mortality across the 2 years, so we brought it down significantly in those 3 areas, which is suggestive that tailored veterinary advice can affect practical change on dairy farms. The statistics for this haven't been done yet. This is a very small part of a very large project, so it's probably been put on the sideline at this point. And that's the end, and I finished 2 minutes before time.
We have time for a few questions, and please use the microphone if possible. No question from Jason? Well, thank you very much.